Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Opening my chat window here. I see everyone's filing in. We'll give everyone a few minutes to kind of jump in and get connected and settled. I hope you have your coffee or water or whatever you're enjoying this afternoon or morning, depending on where you are in our in North America today. I'd love to hear where you guys are all from. If you want to drop in the chat where you're at. It's daylight saving this weekend, so what are your ways of making sure you get up on time? Any strategies welcome? I know it is not the fun one where we get to sleep in an extra hour. Oh, awesome. All over. Oh, windy in LA. Ann Arbor, Michigan. That's sort of in my neck of the woods. I'm based out of Northern Ontario. So, I mean, relatively close. Oh, little boys always awake. Awesome, awesome. Oh, fellow Canadian in there. Hello, Megan. Awesome, awesome. Right, we'll give it one more minute and then we'll jump in. Yeah, I think it's always Saturday at 3 a.m. it goes back, I think, right? So everyone has Sunday to sort of try and figure out how to get up early. Awesome, awesome. All right. So we're going to dive right in. So hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Work of Design Live webinar presented by Studio Designer. If you weren't aware, Studio Designer is the leading platform for interior design businesses, helping designers manage projects, finances, and their client relationships all in one place. We do have two products, our Studio Designer and our MyDoma program, so feel free to reach out and ask if you have any questions about either of them. The Work of Design Live webinar series specifically, we bring you expert insights, real-world strategies, and inspiring conversations to help you grow and thrive in the business of design. My name is Helena Stevens from the Studio Designer team, and today we're excited to welcome Amanda Schneider, founder and president of ThinkLab. Amanda is a nationally recognized design researcher and thought leader focused on the future of the built environment. Through ThinkLab, the research division of Interior Design magazine, she brings data-driven insights to designers, manufacturers, and industry leaders looking to understand where the industry is headed next. Today's session, 2026 Industry Insights, How the Luxury Client is Evolving, explores how luxury residential design is changing and why some of the assumptions designers have long held about high-end clients may no longer apply. Drawing on insights from ThinkLab's Luxury Residential Hackathon, Amanda will unpack what's shifting in client expectations, behaviors, and decision-making, and what designers need to understand now to stay competitive in an evolving luxury market. As always, we'll have a Q&A session at the end, so feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A box at any time. It's located at the bottom of your screen on that little black bar. And don't worry if you need to step away. This session is being recorded and will be sent to all registrants afterwards. So with that, I say hello and welcome to Amanda, who's popped in and all set up. And I will hand it all over to you.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for joining me. I'm so pleased that you could join us here and super excited to be sharing some of these new insights with you. So, a little bit of perspective. As Helena mentioned, this was really created from a year-long project that we conducted last year, looking at how the luxury client is evolving. And as we go, as I kind of go through some of the data and share it with you, we will be actively involving you in the chat. So we've got a few polls that we're going to be doing. We'll also have a few pause moments that we're going to engage in the chat. So the more you engage with us there, I will say likely the more you're going to get out of this because you're going to kind of see where you fall in relation to some of your peers that are on this webinar here. So before we dive in, I want to give you a little bit of perspective about who ThinkLab is, maybe who I am. So if you're not familiar with ThinkLab, ThinkLab is the research division of Standout Design Group. So Standout Design Group is a part of all of these wonderful brands that you see across the bottom. You're probably familiar with Interior Design Magazine, Metropolis Magazine, Lux Home and Interiors. They have really been acquiring a lot of other brands as of late. So recent acquisitions include Design Milk, Azure, Architizer, and then there's a few other internal startups, including our Surround Podcast Network. We'll be talking a little bit about some podcasts. I host a top 1% podcast called Design Nerds Anonymous. And Olga, maybe if you can pop a link into the chat here, we can get a few more followers of that podcast. But our job as the research division of all of these brands is to leverage their reach to the design community to kind of study what's happening in the world of design and help you stay ahead, especially as you look at the business of design. So I love that we kind of exist at this intersection of business and design. I do have a QR code on your screen right now, so I would love it if you follow me on LinkedIn. I'm a big LinkedIner. We've got a lot of exciting things coming up. And while our work covers both the commercial and residential side, I do post a lot about interesting things that we're discovering. So I hope that you can all follow me there. And all the research that we're presenting to you today comes from this process of really engaging with the community. All right. So why are we here? What are we looking to study? As we look at these industry insights and how the luxury client is evolving, let me tell you how this research came about. We work both again on the commercial and residential side. And as we get these questions, especially from luxury residential product brands, we're often asked, how does our industry define luxury? And I think this is changing today, right? You can now buy luxury sheets at Walmart. You can book a luxury car by the hour. Really, as we look at perceptions and how they're changing, especially in this increasingly digitized era, we believe that it's changing. And we wanted to know how that translates to our world of design. So our research was really designed to kind of bring clarity to this landscape and better help our product brands, as well as designers like all of you, understand how to better reach those clients, maybe how they have changed in recent years and how they will be changing as time goes on. So we're going to divide our presentation today into 3 sections. The first one is really going to be defining, what the heck does luxury mean today? Who is today's luxury client? We'll also in that sector get into a little bit of economics. I will say one of the hypotheses that we went into this research thinking was that in good times, luxury is good. In bad times, luxury is still good. And spoiler alert, it's not always the case, at least not by certain sectors. So we'll unpack that a little bit. So who is today's luxury client and kind of what's happening with the economics there? The second section is who should we be watching? We're really looking at some new perspectives and new potential buyers that are kind of showing up. So we'll be asking you all to share if you're seeing any of these 3 profiles that we'll share with you. And then the last one is what do they want? This is really looking at aggregated data about how those buyers are changing and what features they're looking for. You'll notice as we go through, some of this is ThinkLab original research. A great portion and more than we're going to have time to show you today also focuses on the product side. But I think we've selected some real interesting insights that will really apply to you in the work that you do designing. All right, without further ado, let's dive into section 1. So who is today's luxury client? What's changing? And what do we need to know that helps us really adapt maybe how we're thinking about future business? So let's start by trying to define luxury. Now, not to be too nerdy here, we have kind of a brand built around this. I'll show you my fun hat here. Design nerd, right? Not to get too nerdy on all of you, but as researchers, one of the things we have to start with is really defining what do we even mean by luxury? How do we define that? Because those sheets at Walmart that I mentioned are probably not it, especially in the work that all of you do. So when it comes to resi, it's properties that are in the top 5 to 10% of any given market. But as you can imagine, that means properties in LA versus Atlanta or Aspen versus Columbus, Ohio probably look pretty different, what that top 5 to 10%. And I would say even more important than that, how these clients make decisions, what they value, depending especially on the climate, the geography, what they're doing, but how they make decisions about who to hire, what products to buy, probably looks very different too. And as we look at this information, I'll say that one data point that surprised us as well is if you look at national averages, the national average luxury home price is just 1.3 to 1.8 million. Now, I'm imagining that's probably, if you're like me, far less than one would expect or imagine. But again, we're aggregating everything from, celebrity homes on the coast of Los Angeles to a luxury home in Columbus, Ohio, right? So if you aggregate all of those out, it's just 1.3 to 1.8 million. Curious if that surprised anybody else. Go ahead and pop a note in the chat, but it certainly surprised our research team. So let's look at the state of the luxury residential market. How is it faring? You'll remember I said in the beginning that, we came into this with a hypothesis that when times are good, luxury is good. When times are bad, luxury is good. But actually, what we discovered is it's not necessarily immune to the ups and downs of the economy. Right now, or at least in 2025, it was described as luxury equilibrium, defined by consistent real estate performance, I would say measured growth, and really what we're calling sustained buyer confidence. That said, as with the previous slide, the nuances vary significantly by region. But here's kind of another interesting piece too, as we look at subsecting this market and not only by geographies and regions, but also by, I would say, levels of luxury buyers. Um, it gets interesting when you start to look at the nuances of this. So, about 40% of consumer spending today is done by about 20% of households by income. So, interesting kind of discrepancy there. That means a larger portion of spending is also likely done from this luxury sector, which means probably those top, tippity top, we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Top portions are likely more immune than the lower portions of that luxury segment to economic conditions. So even though we've seen some ups and downs, especially since COVID, the higher up, not surprisingly, the more resilient they are to some of those pressures. I would say this quote really kind of perfectly summarizes that when markets feel unstable, the rich move their money, often to properties in legacy markets that will likely remain more stable. Again, probably not talking to a lot of you. Real estate for them is one of the few hard assets that really provide this long-term security when other markets feel shaky. So, interesting. We call out some of the legacy markets. Think about Aspen, Miami, New York City. And when we look at that top ultra wealthy, they really are leaning into luxury real estate because it does tend to be a bit more stable long-term investment for them. All right, so where are they moving their money? Where are these luxury buyers located? So, like many other things in our world, luxury real estate was affected by COVID. I know we don't want to say that word anymore, but buyers have continued to prioritize quality of life over proximity to traditional corporate hub cities. Obviously, the move to hybrid work and the ability to work from anywhere has affected this. But today, those amenities are everything. Those luxury purchases are increasingly reflecting a hospitality-driven lifestyle. You're going to hear about wellness. That obviously is rising importance, but also things like access to nature, walkability, culture, climate resilience, and I would say in some cases, sustainability is even influencing where they choose to invest. Now, as we're looking at a lot of data across different geographies, I will say that not all major cities have regained the momentum that they lost during the pandemic. Some have recovered a lot more quickly than others. But those that are thriving offer the amenities that buyers are seeking today and often provide maybe some additional financial advantage, like lower cost of living, maybe tax incentives, and even something as simple as a greater ease of insurability, which is interesting. So what you're looking at here are the $1 million cities by state, and you can kind of see top cities, including things like California. So when you see that little number, 218 right under the California symbol there, that really means that there are 218, um, sorry, 218 cities in California that have homes over 1 million. New York, if you look at that, has 76 cities, Florida, 30 cities, and on down the list that we go. So we're really looking at where the most luxury buyers live by illustrating those states that have the greatest number of cities with those average homes above 1 million. So these are maybe places to think about investing, especially as you get into those darker blue colors. if you're doing work outside of your region, it's really a good place to look at where those buyers might be. And I'm very curious to see if this lines up with the work that you're doing. So let me pause here for our first poll. And what I want to ask is, how has the share of projects you work on outside your local market changed in the past 2 to 3 years? So you can suggest it's increasing, meaning maybe you live in Miami, but you're doing more projects outside of your market. Maybe it's decreasing. I was doing many more projects outside of my market, but now it's much more local. Or you could select, I see a few people selecting, I'm not working on projects outside of my market. So we'll give you just a few more minutes to look at that. And I'm looking at some of the comments here. So a few of you are surprised that a home of that price range in New Jersey is very builder grade. Yes, I can imagine that in your market, Cara. And Jennifer saying that standard specs around 1 million in Dallas, luxury is 3 million and over. So definitely, yep, the map agreed with you guys there. All right, we've got polls slowing down here. So I'm going to go ahead and end poll and we'll share results. So it looks like about a quarter of you say it's increasing. We're actually seeing that increase much more in the commercial side, where project teams are being spread out a little bit more, a little bit less so in the commercial side. Only 6% of you said decreasing. About a third of you said it's staying the same, and 40% said you're not working on projects outside your geographic market. So interesting to see, and probably will correlate as we get to another poll question that's looking at what sector of the market you're looking at. Is this just projects coming into your market, or are you working with maybe a family that has multiple homes and things like that going outside your market? So super interesting and hopefully helpful to see yourself in those poll numbers. All right, so let's start talking a little bit about that tippity tip tip top that's much more resistant to these economic changes. You've probably heard these terms before. The UHNW, that is the ultra high net worth population. This is by definition, and not just in ThinkLab research, in a lot of secondary research, meaning other research sources that we cite, means individuals with a net worth in excess of 30 million. Now, this is the upper end of luxury, and I would say this is an important segment to understand, not only because of their economic resilience, but also because of, this is kind of that ideal luxury client when we say that we imagine. Important to know that the US leads here globally, accounting for almost 40% of the total ultra high net worth population, which is more than the combined share of all other countries in the top 10. Some of the research that we cite from Coldwell Banker note that there can be a significant differences between buyers with a net worth of 1 to 5 million and those with a net worth of 30 million or more. And we're going to kind of get into that in our third section here a little bit more, but I think it's important to just really stress that, again, largest share in the US, good time to be here and doing what we're all doing, and that it really is disproportionate to other segments as well. So let's move on to look at kind of where are they? We looked at that map of those luxury buyers in general, but let's get into these ultra high net worth folks. The 7 fastest growing states up till 2030, so over the next 5 years, are Florida, Utah, Texas. Not surprisingly, a lot of what we call the smile states. So a lot of the states kind of in the better, maybe a little bit lower cost of living, better weather as we talk about some of those. You see Florida, obviously the Big Apple, and major markets like Dallas and Houston kind of popping up there. When we look at where the ultra high net worth population resides, it's in these 10 cities in yellow. So you can see I've named a few of them there, a few outside of the US, Tokyo, Hong Kong as well, but you can start to see this reflected that we really are seeing, more of these US based cities kind of hit this list. And the last thing I'm going to point out before I leave this slide is that in recent history, the ultra high net worth population growth is actually outpacing the average. You can see about 7 times. So in short, the rich are getting richer, and a lot of them are here in the US. So really good population to target as you look to grow your business. That's important to see as well. Now, this is a quote from the VP of Coldwell Banker's luxury program, global luxury program. And he said, well, ultra high net worth buyers remain active and are pursuing these second and third homes. These buyers with net worths between 1 and 5 million, again, as we talk about segmenting that luxury sector, are much more likely to be increasingly cautious, maybe seeking deals, delaying decisions, or targeting homes with renovation potential. So I think this is really important as we start to segment the market from that top, ultra high net worth, again, earnings excess of 30 million versus kind of the rest of these luxury buyers. How are their buying behaviors different? I'll say while the ultra high net worth client is fun to dream about, maybe the typical bread and butter luxury client who's possibly driving volume, depending on what sector you focus on, is much more likely to fall into this 1 to 5 million category, and therefore would be much more sensitive to these market fluctuations. All right. Now, if you followed any of ThinkLab's work or any of my work, or if you follow me on LinkedIn already, including my TED Talk and a new book, I've written a book that will be coming out this May. You'll know that generational research is near and dear to our hearts here at ThinkLab, and especially my heart. Um, and when we speak with product brands that are serving the luxury residential sector, we know that a lot of their challenges lie in balancing the needs of what I'll call a traditional buyer with the emerging needs of tomorrow's buyer. So I want to give you some additional food for thought, again, as you're managing your own business and what sector of this luxury market you want to focus on. Um, is what does the generational makeup of the ultra high net worth client look like in the future? Because I would say it's shifting. Today, millennials and Gen Z, so that is the light blue line. Here, I'll point to it so you can see it. The light blue line here, you can see anything that's angling up and to the right is growing. So millennials and Gen Z today are about under 10%, but you can see by 2040, which is really not that far away, they're going to be over a third of this category. You add in other fast growth categories. Gen X, my generation, is about a quarter today, but will be nearly half in just 15 short years. Amazing how fast that goes. And while baby boomers today make up nearly half, 44%, 44.5% here, you can see that they're kind of declining as a share of this ultra high net worth. And in 15 years will be nearly half of what they were. So maybe as you think about your business, as you think about how you want to serve these clients, as you think about traditional clients versus these increasingly digitally driven younger generations, how might that need to look different for you? So lots of food for thought there. All right, let's move on to our second sector. We've already talked about ultra high net worth clients, started to segment and define that luxury sector. But in addition to ultra high net worth, of course, we'd all love these less sensitive, less economically sensitive clients. Maybe that's possible, maybe that's not. So, who should we be watching for? Are there some emerging client types that maybe could be interesting to us in our business? Well, I'm going to take you through three different client types that kind of came up in our research that are kind of emerging and interesting. Now, the first one won't surprise you because we already saw that Gen X little bar that kind of going up and to the right, that yellow bar. So the first one is the luxury latchkey generation. So you may have heard Gen X referred to as the latchkey generation, and they are poised to be the first major beneficiary of the coming silver tsunami, as it's called. Basically, that silver tsunami is as baby boomers are retiring and other things, it's starting to transfer that wealth. And much of that is really starting to go to these Gen X buyers that are coming into wealth, coming into money, and really choosing how they spend it. So, over the past 5 years, Gen X ownership of high end homes has climbed by roughly 10%, and that is growing faster than any other generation, even as baby boomers still hold more than half of the overall luxury share. At the same time, Gen X buyers are driving a surge in demand for flexible, and this word comes up a lot, this multi generational living. About 45% say adaptable floor plans are now among the most sought after features, with many Gen X households balancing aging parents and their children. And they're prioritizing homes with separate suites, maybe guest houses, or accessible design elements that can evolve as their family needs change. So, what are those property drivers? What are those elements that this latchkey, luxury latchkey generation is interested in? We hear about things like functional luxury, which just means that it works. It's not just beautiful and impressive to see, but really works for how their family wants to live. Again, we're seeing things like multi-generational housing. We talked about their caring for the aging parents, the silver tsunami, who maybe aren't able to live on their own or don't want to live on their own. Um, Prime locations, again, as flexible work shows up, that one shouldn't surprise us. We see strong investment potential. These are very practical generation that's really trying to make sure they're making the most of their investments. And so on and so forth down the line. A few others that kind of stick out too are this smart home technology. We've got a few Design Nerds Anonymous podcast episodes. One that is really looking at Gen Alpha and what they're going to want and kind of merging how they're already starting to, or exploring, I guess, how they're already starting to influence some of their parents' buying behavior and what their expectations of technology will be. But we're already seeing that show up and evolve kind of how we're thinking about some of these spaces. And you'll see that as I go through these three different profiles, some of them are not necessarily surprising here. Olga has just put the What Kind of Homes Will Gen Alpha Want, that podcast episode I mentioned. So if anybody's interested, click on that link. You can flag it for later and maybe take a walk after this and get away from your computer. All right, let's move on to the second profile that we want to share with you, these rising luxury buyers. So the next one is what we're calling the she elite. Affluent women are becoming increasingly powerful forces in the luxury housing market. And I'm not sure if there's any other Bridgerton fans out there. Is anybody else watching the newest season of Bridgerton? But it's interesting to me to see that this profile tops the list of emerging clients when you consider, I guess, what the world used to look like maybe not that long ago. So, with personal wealth above 5 million, this she elite buyer now accounts for about 15% of luxury home ownership in the US and over 13% worldwide. They're also heavily influencing buying decisions. More than 90% say that more than 90% of women are either equal partners in the decision process or even the primary decision makers on high-end real estate purchases. So really interesting to see kind of how this personality, and again, as we think about how they make decisions, how they might connect, how they might react and want to work with us, it may look a little bit different than our traditional buyers. So let's look at what this she elite is looking for. You can see this list kind of changes a little bit here. Proximity to friends, families, and quality schools. Some of them are maybe single moms or moms that really want to make sure that that is prioritize their children, sustainable living, wellness amenities. You can kind of see this theme coming through. Enhanced security, I would say, especially if they are the primary, maybe living alone, that security piece comes into play. Community spaces, obviously, one could imagine this really relates to children and wanting to kind of network with others. It takes a village, right? Child-friendly facilities. And then again, we see this flexibility idea, this flexible floor plans for evolving lifestyle needs, right? All right, so let's move up to our third profile to watch. Profile 3 is being dubbed the move up buyer. So really, as we look at what's happening with inflation and the cost of living, it's really shifting the dynamic. Rising prices are elevating ordinary buyers into the luxury tier by default in some cases. And today's market dynamics mean that many buyers are landing in this luxury sector, whether they planned on it or not. With home prices up 47% nationwide over the last 5 years, homeowners are tapping into their increased equity and using it to step into some of these higher end properties, sometimes entering the luxury market for the first time. Now, as we focus group at ThinkLab and really kind of explored what the difference is in some of these different buyer types, this would be probably in that top 20% of the market, but definitely not the ultra high net worth here. One of our designers said younger people are building grand homes, but then they have no money left for furniture. They'll buy an IKEA couch for the time, but spend on the millwork. So we're seeing kind of how they're even using their money to invest in these properties look a little bit different. Some of that is because the property they see as a longer term investment versus maybe some of the furniture or things that they're putting inside. Another stated, younger ones don't have realistic expectations. They want it faster. They watch HGTV and get these underlying expectations. So I'm sure that we could all fill the chat with some um, maybe stories that have happened about things that we've seen. So I want to pause for our second poll and just see how these struck you. Are you guys already seeing these emerge in your work? So the question asks, which of the following client types are you seeing most in your market? So you could be seeing all three, but we want to see what you're seeing most in your market. So we're seeing responses kind of come in. Okay. Most are picking at least one. We only have one person that said none of the above so far. It's like a horse race here on the back of it. We'll show the results in just a minute. So there's a couple of clear winners, and we'll give you just one more minute to get those responses in. We're seeing it start to slow. We'll give you like 10 more seconds. If you haven't had the chance to participate in this poll, we'll give you like 10 more seconds to get your vote in. All right. If you want to share the results here. So what we saw, a very small portion, only 10% say we're not seeing any of those, which is interesting because that could be an opportunity for business growth for you, depending on your market, where you are. We're seeing the largest percentage of you working in that luxury latchkey generation. 43% of you said that you're seeing that Gen X client kind of emerging. 37% said we're seeing the move up buyers. I see a few of your comments in the chat. So obviously a few of you are seeing that. Only 10% are seeing She Elite. So maybe that's another opportunity. In the meantime, we will keep watching our Bridgerton, right? All right. So let's get to our third and final section, which is what do they want? So I want to, oh, I'm seeing some interesting comments. I can't help myself here. So Nancy says that HGTV has warped people's idea of length of time and cost of projects. I think that's entirely true. And Christine says move up buyers are not my client in New York City. They can't afford luxury service or products. I think that's probably the case in some of those higher real estate markets for sure, like New York City, New York City. And Melissa says the She Elite have always been great clients. I would imagine that working with She Elites would probably look a little bit different than maybe some traditional clients too. So interesting to hear that. All right, let's get into our third and final section, which is what do they want? How are these buyers evolving? What should we be thinking about today? Now, obviously, each of you have your own perspective on this based on your local market, based on the clients that you work with. So understand that what we're going to be sharing here is aggregated survey data across the nation, which just like that surprising number about, what was it, 1.3 million, the average home size, when you aggregate it, it can look a little different than your market. So I'd love as we kind of go through some of this, I'd love for you to stay in the chat, love how active the chat has been. And tell us if this aligns with what you're seeing. I love how some of you are commenting about the market you come from and where that perspective is coming from. So if this aligns, we'd love to hear that. If it doesn't align, we'd love to hear that. So I want to start with this quote, which is that the real estate market is experiencing a period of significant transformation driven by evolving buyer preferences, technological information, and these shifting lifestyle priorities. Some of those we heard about in those previous profiles. These trends reflect not just current market conditions, but really point toward the future of home ownership and living perceptions across all price points. So I think the point of this is just that there's so much change happening right now. And while some things have not changed, there are some pretty big things that are changing. Again, kind of this work from anywhere, I think, is really evolving the geographies that we can live in and really kind of point to a future that may look a little bit different than the one that we've historically lived in. Now, here's where I want to fan all of your egos a little bit. So, ThinkLab does a ton of research on the design community. You may have heard of a report called the US Design Industry Benchmark Report. This is a report that we do on behalf of Sandow Design Group that is really referenced by a lot of varying entities, really looking at the health of the interior design industry and some stats that really help us see where we fall It does a really good job of dividing commercial and residential and looking at, again, those growth markets where designers live, where that business is coming from, even things like where designers' time goes and what their biggest challenges are. So we just came out with the U.S. Design Industry Benchmark Report for 2026 that you can access for free on our website. And this is one of the stats from that report that I think is really important for all of us to think about. The power, I guess, the recommendation power of a designer compared to an average consumer is around 40 times. If you think about it, this totally has to feel right and make sense for you guys. You fall in love with a sofa and you're going to recommend that. You're probably going to be recommending a lot more sofas than the average single person homeowner is going to be buying. You may also be familiar with another study that we do at ThinkLab on behalf of our sister company Interior Design magazine called the Interior Design Giants of Design. This looks each year at a ranking of the top 200 interior design firms and some basic statistics about them. It's typically published in the magazine. At ThinkLab, we use the data in a lot of ways behind the scenes with the partners that we work with. But that 40 times is for the average designer anywhere in any sector. When you get to these top interior design giants of design, those top 200 firms, their specification power is 140 times the power of the average American consumer. Now, this does kind of look across commercial and residential, but residential is still a pretty solid sector of that. So I would say I hope that this is an interesting stat to you. I hope it's an empowering stat to you, and you are really thinking about how you align with the product brands, especially that you're recommending. Think about their stance on sustainability. Think in general, how do you choose to wield that partner? What is your buying power saying about your work? So hopefully that's super empowering to all of you. And as we look at what's happening in the design community, we are seeing some of this change reflected. And when we explore what that means in ThinkLab research, we're hearing things like, I'll say the third quote. Clients want anything custom, nothing ready made. They even want to mix and match dining chairs to feel like their space is curated and bespoke. So I think it's an interesting dichotomy that we're in now, especially as we look at some of those different generational shifts in the buyer and the buying preference and the buying style, especially as some of these younger generations get increasingly digital. It's a really interesting paradox that it's simultaneously getting easier with retail design and even, ready-made things that are happening out there. That a big part of the designer's role today is wielding that specification power to help them make sure that their space doesn't look like their neighbors or doesn't look like it just fell off of the RH truck like all of their other folks. So, um, so yeah, I see a lot of people get excited about the links. So you can get the link for the most recent U.S. Design Industry Benchmark Report. And if you can hang on with me, by the time we get to the end of this presentation, we'll give you a link that you can take part in the survey for next year. We're already open that survey. We're collecting responses, and you will get an early peek at that data if you take the survey. So we'll give you some clues where you can do that. All right. So what are the most popular design features today? Um, Number one is the indoor-outdoor merging. You've seen that as we talk about the geographies that people are looking to move to. Number two are flexible layouts. We heard about that with the Gen X buyer, really something that they are looking for. We also hear about things like minimalist aesthetics, not surprising. So it can kind of vary as we go along with time and so on and so forth down this list. I'd love to hear in the chat, what are you guys seeing that's missing from this list? Some of them are probably pretty obvious, not shocking to you, but this is your chance to hear from one another. Is there anything that you're like, oh yeah, I see that on the list and that definitely should be on the list? Or maybe something that you're seeing not on that list that you're like, my clients are asking for this. No responses yet. Formal dining rooms, more formal dining rooms coming back. Okay, lots of dining rooms coming in. Interesting. We'll invite you to continue to add to that as we go. But let's move on to this idea of wellness amenities. You saw this come up in a lot of our profiles. People are wanting these wellness amenities. Well, what does that look like? Obviously, not necessarily a change, but something that's continued to be a popular investment are spa-like primary bathrooms. Um, Fitness studios, I think, came in that obviously is something probably driven by pandemic that maybe is not going to go away. Lush landscaping, obviously this indoor outdoor is important there as well. Yes, I see dog washes, pet rooms. You'll see that come up in just a minute. New outbuildings for home office spaces in the garden. I can appreciate that. I work from home. I'm in my little home office right now, and it is nice to have a little bit of separation from work and home so we're not always hearing that laundry going off. Smart storage solutions, lots of in-cabinet organizers. That certainly came up in our research. Lots more built-ins and investing in things like that as well. So somebody mentioned pet spas, which is interesting to us because as we look at digging into that personalization, we also heard some of these, and some of these are a little bit surprising, maybe, maybe not. Maybe it depends on where your political views are, but underground safe rooms and bunkers. Um, my favorite is probably this pet spa here, and maybe for the golfers in the room, that simulation space. So if anybody has any other fun ones as we look at trends in property personalization, we'd love to hear those in the chat as well. And Christine says all couples should have separate rooms, right? Is that a new way to keep the spice alive? I know I have some friends that have chosen to do that as well. All right. I want to further kind of segment some of these because we do see these preferences. We have a lot more in this study that starts to segment further by looking at those different buyer types. We segmented them by the top 1%, top 5%, and top 20%. So we looked at kind of these emerging client types, but we wanted to break down into these different unique profiles. Um, I would say the top 1% is really looking at that ultra luxe, those ultra high net worth clients, defined as those with the top 1% of real estate in their markets. Again, if you remember, this is the 10 to 30 million dollar mansion owners, probably owning multiple homes, probably multiple boats that I want to ride on, and maybe multiple statues that I wouldn't be allowed to touch. But profile two, kind of this top 5%, is those in the top 5% of real estate value in their market. Think about doctors, lawyers, again, that upper echelon. And profile three is the top 20%. So these would be those move up buyers, someone who's hiring a designer, but probably only owns one home. And it might not, it might be just across that $1 million mark and is in need of some renovation. So let's look at who is your primary client today. Do you play in this top 1%? That ultra high net worth, are you in the top 5% or the top 20%? All right. I would say this is coming as we would expect it. Some of you are focused on the luxury sector, some of you are not. A much smaller portion are focused on that top 1%. You might be working in multiple different ones. That certainly is the case for a lot of designers, but we'll give you just about 10 more seconds here to get through this poll. I would say this is about where I expected it to come through. So Olga, if we want to end that, we can share the results. So it looks about 6% of you are working on that ultra high net worth client, that top 1%. As we look at that top 5%, again, a little bit different buying habits, a little bit different choices they're going to make. About 42% of you are in that top 5%, 45% of you are in that top 20%, and just under 10% or none of the above. But maybe that's an aspirational category, especially as we look at that economic resilience, which is interesting. So we're not going to get too deep in all of the results here because we are coming to a close with our time together, but I do have two just quick slides that kind of shows how some preferences are different across these three different echelons of buying categories. I would say what we heard from designers who serve this top 1% is that their clients value the exclusivity and customization that a lot of the luxury brands provide. Now, what we're looking at here is how brand conscious the luxury consumer is. And again, top 1%, they just don't want what their neighbors or their friends have, and they don't want what people can get at the next retail store. However, the top 5% looks a little bit different. They say even if it comes off a manufacturer showroom, maybe I reupholster it, which creates that custom look and texture, but maybe that client has a little bit more flexibility. And then when we get to that top 20%, especially if we're looking at a move up buyer like that, it's interesting because they tend to be one of the most brand conscious because they want to look like they've made it, right? So they want to signal I'm luxury to those encounter their homes, even though they might not personally care as much about the brand's legacy. So I think it's interesting to kind of see these different buying behaviors from these different clients. And just one more quick, this is probably the most data heavy slide. So sorry to do that to you at the very end of this presentation, but what are the most important features if we started to kind of segment this by those three different buying types? So we've asked them to select their top here, top three. So you can see, luxury amenities, theaters, gyms, etc. Really important for that top 1%. This is your ultra high net worth. You see it to start to kind of decline. That's this lightest blue, 44% for the top five selected that, and much less of the top 20%. This personalization and customization really comes in strongly for all three of them, but a little bit higher for, the mid to lower tier there. Outdoor living, this is really around that 40 to 50% for all three, just depending on what their other choices were. And, as we're looking at, again at that brand consciousness, we see it kind of going up in importance, I guess, relative to some of these others as that buyer kind of moves down these categories. So, again, we're just showing you some highlights that would be kind of interesting to the design side of the industry as we look at some of these different criteria across those different product categories. But what I encourage you to take with you is maybe a consideration of what these buyers are looking for and how you can leverage that knowledge to grow your business. So I want to start to kind of wrap us up here where we want to save some time for questions. But if you take nothing else away today, you can take a screenshot of this particular slide. What I want to leave you with is this. Section one, we explored who is today's luxury client. And while the average price of a luxury home really kind of surprised us too, the luxury profile is regionally specific. We learned that their ultra high net worth clients are relatively undeterred by market conditions. Again, that's someone with a net worth of over 30 million, and that they are much more prevalent here in the US. So lots of opportunity there, but obviously very competitive market to get the business of them, as we saw today. Who should we be watching? We reviewed these three emerging luxury residential clients. A lot of you were working with this luxury latchkey, these Gen X buyers that are rising, and this move up buyer. And maybe we learned that the She Elite is an opportunity. And I love what Elizabeth says in the chat here. Some clients are 1%, but think they're top 20%. So she's got maybe some more sensitive clients there as well, which is great. And the third section, we really looked at what do they want. And again, we saw that those desires kind of vary, their motivations vary by top 1, 5, and 20%. But there were some universal appeals, including indoor, outdoor living, that flexibility to change over time, and really this idea of personalization, which I think is super important for our design teams, especially, and the unique value that you bring. And hopefully in that sector too, you have this amazing stat that says how powerful your specification power is. And I hope that you wield that power for good. So with that, I'm going to close this out. We're going to take some questions. But before you leave us, I really want to encourage you to please scan this QR code, if you will. You can flag it for later, along with that podcast that we shared. But we'd love to invite you to have your voice heard as part of the U.S. Design Industry Benchmark Survey for 2027. So I know that's a little bit confusing because we put a link. You can download the one that's here today so you can kind of see the results. But I really want to encourage you to take this survey for next year is really, really important. All right.
Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. That was actually so much information. And I feel like this probably isn't what I should have taken away from it, but I am like, I would like a dog bath in my house. I'm
Right?
like, oh, what a fun luxury piece that I would thoroughly enjoy. And my husband is not going to thank anyone for coming up with that.
Now we
New
planted the idea.
project.
It's
Yeah.
not going away.
So I really appreciate it. Honestly, so much good facts, and I feel like I'm also a data person. I know some people in the chat were like, "No, keep the data coming because it's power, right? It's like so good." So as we transition into the Q&A, I have one more poll. I hope you guys aren't polled out. This one is just if you'd want to, what would you like to know more about? Studio Designer, MyDoma, ThinkLab. I'm going to launch it now. Just let us know. This kind of helps us guide future conversations. Also, if you have any feedback on what you want to see in the next webinar, I'd love to hear it as well. So I'll just leave that poll kind of going in the background because it's our last one. So I'll just leave it in there. And yeah, Amanda, I'll hand it back over to you for Q&A. I know I did see a few jump into the box, I think there. And I mean that it's been a really active chat. So
Been a really
um,
active chat, which I love to
yeah,
see because sometimes
yeah.
it's easier. Oh, we do have a Q&A. I have to call out though. I hear someone's working on a bedroom for cats, only cats. And as a cat mom, I love that. But also like, woof, that can't smell good. Um,
That's
okay.
awesome.
Okay, Portia's, if I'm saying your name right, Portia, is saying, what does the research say about phased projects? I'm not sure I understand the question. I will say, in general, some things that we're hearing is the traditional design process, schematic design, design development, as people are, expectations are going up for how quickly we can deliver these things. Again, maybe it's the HGTV effect, maybe it's just the Amazonification, if that's a word, of our world right now. We are hearing of some firms starting to really condense those phases. So if that's what you're asking, I would say we're definitely seeing that, and I would be um, curious. Oh, she's saying whole home at one time versus phased over time. I mean, I think we're seeing both. Both came up in our research. There are some obviously that are trying to do it now, others who are phasing over time. And I think that, we didn't see a trend specifically by top one, 5 or 20% on those, but they did come up in the qualitative that we're seeing both. Chris says she's seeing more phased over time. I would say definitely for that move up buyer, they're trying to be smart with their money, but then there's other buyers that are getting concerned about inflation. And, there's the old phrase that the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago, but second best time is today. So, um, I think that we are seeing both happening. A lot of people in the comments are saying more phased work, more phased work. Yep, interesting. All right, I'm going to try and scroll up and see if there's any other questions. Lots of his and her bathrooms as well. That's a beautiful one. I have 3 boys, so for me, that should be a must in my house. I should have my own bathroom, right? All right. Well, if there are no other questions, we can go ahead and close our time together. But I want to thank you all so much for joining, and I hope that we can connect on LinkedIn. I hope that you'll participate in that survey for our U.S. Design Industry Benchmark Report. I hope that some of the links that we put in there are really helpful to you and your business. And you can always drop me a follow-up note on LinkedIn if there's things that our research can answer for you. We have more projects slated for 2026, and we're even, as you saw, starting on some projects for 2027. So lots more questions to answer, and I really, really appreciate all of your time. So, Helena, I'll push it back to you. And if there's
Absolutely.
anything else I can share, I'm happy to.
Absolutely. No, I'm here to say kind of exactly what you did. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us today. I know we've had you last year for some of these data-driven predictions and everything, so it's super great to have you back again. And understanding how clients' expectations are evolving, especially at the luxury level, is essential for designers who want to stay competitive. So we're really excited to provide that information through this platform. And so, on behalf of our entire team here at Studio Designer, we thank you again for spending part of your day with us here. And please, we'll look forward to the next Work of Design Live webinar and hope to see you all there.